Hello, agentpreneurs, and welcome to the Daily List Report. I'm Randy Shiozaki, your regular host here. While you're here, of course, if you enjoy the content on this channel, please consider subscribing. Click the little bell so that you're notified you don't miss a single episode. Today, we've got back on one of my absolute favorite guests. It's been a little while since we've had Eric Mitchell on the show. I think you should all know this by now. We've got a great slide up here. Eric Mitchell is the most connected mortgage professional in America, and that's saying something, actually. And what that means, and I've seen him do this, he's relentless about building relationships, leading with value first, always value first, which is why he's doing this show, right? He's not getting anything directly out of this other than giving back to all of you and sharing his insights and perspective, and good things will come from that. We've talked a lot about that. I think Eric embodies that. He's been in the business for 21 years. What that means for all of you is that he has seen the ups and downs, right? So we're going through an unprecedented, crazy time right now, but he saw us through the Great Recession and even prior to that. And so he has a bit of history to share, which I think that perspective is really important. And he's got a book coming up. We've talked about this before. We did a great episode. You should all watch that on some of the topics that he covers in The Why of Money. And that's coming soon. We'll touch on that briefly. But without further ado, let me bring Eric back to the show. Eric, welcome back to the Daily List Report.
Thanks, man. Excited to be here as always.
It's good to have you. And for the first time, you are doing the show from your office. So I presume that means that you are back to work.
Back at the, well, we've always been working, but yeah, back at the office. Our team, we all collectively decided that we were all getting a little squirrely, and that we all wanted to get back in and become a little bit more productive.
Yeah, I didn't mean to imply that you weren't working, because I know you've been working like crazy, and business has been booming, hasn't it?
It's crazy, man. I mean, our August, and same with all mortgage companies across the board, and we're not alone here, but our August broke every record in the book for us.
Wow.
We closed more. I mean, you look at it in 2019, and then January was our biggest month of our company's history. Then February beat January, March beat February, April beat March, and on all the way to August, right? August was our biggest month. It beat July. And so, our industry has been incredibly blessed. I mean, we included. It's a very blessed time. And the challenge with that is there's one thing to feel blessed, which we are, and we do. Another thing is just tempering that a little bit because of the pain and suffering that's in the marketplace, right? There's just so much pain out there with entrepreneurs and business owners and employees of industries that are still suffering, losses, and so yes, we feel blessed, and I certainly feel that way. At the same time, we just always want to be respectful of other people's situations.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. Eric, I had Rick Sharga. I don't know if you know Rick. I had Rick Sharga on again about a week ago, and we were talking a little bit about the differences between, now and, let's say, for those who are afraid of another 2008, 2009 crash. And one of the big differences, and I hope I don't misquote this number, is that right now homeowners in America have about $4.5 trillion in equity in their homes. So we're in a very, very different position than we were before. And so I think a great place to start, Eric, would be, let's talk a little bit about the state of the market right now. Talk a little bit about forbearance. We're in a very different position than we were 12 years ago. It is this tale of two worlds right now, as you talked about. Why don't you talk a little bit about sort of what you're seeing in the market right now with rates and inventory and forbearance and all of the sort of this crazy cocktail of things that are going on, and the election, frankly, and what that might mean for the markets.
Yeah. So if I'm a realtor, the number one question that I'm being asked as a realtor is what's going to happen to the market. Are prices going to go up? Are prices going to go down? I mean, there's a frenzy in the market right now. Almost every home going on the market's got multiple offers on it. And so everybody gets a little worried, when you're in a frenzy like this. But the data coming out, like CoreLogic came out with data showing that we haven't had this level of delinquencies since 2008. Record delinquencies on mortgages. But what they're not telling you, right, in that data, so if you listen to just that piece of data, right, it's a bad soundbite. But when you dive into the numbers, the delinquencies number that CoreLogic is looking at is including all of the forbearances. It's not excluding it's including the forbearances.
Yes.
Right. And so if the federal government comes out and says you don't need to make your mortgage payment, just apply here, no qualification needed, right? We'll take your word for it. Then you're gonna have a lot of people applying for forbearances, which we have. And so I think it's like 7% of mortgages are in forbearance, somewhere around that number right now.
And then, by the way, Eric, just for context, that's down a point and a half from what it was earlier during the pandemic, right? 4 or 5 months ago.
Yep. And so, but it's still a big number. Yes, it's down, but it's still a big number.
Huge.
However, when you look at the biggest difference I see in the numbers today versus the numbers from 2007, 8, 9, and 10 is the way people were buying real estate in 2004, 5, and 6 is they were leveraging to the hilt, right? Like, I had friends that were buying 10 investment properties with no money down.
Yeah.
And so when you're buying 10 investment properties with no money down, stated income, stated assets, stated job, non-owner occupied, blah, 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 right? You got 10 properties with no equity, and all of a sudden the market moves, you just liquidate them, you short sell them, they go into foreclosure because there's no equity. Well, that's not the case now, right? I mean, the level of equity that homeowners have right now is unprecedented. And so people aren't going to let their homes go into short sale, because why short sale when you have equity? Just sell the home. And will the market be able to absorb those sales? Well, look at the demand.
Yes.
We're in the middle of a pandemic and there's massive demand. Forget as the jobs keep coming back, little by little, we're fighting and inching along, creating jobs inch by inch. That just creates more demand, not less demand, right? And so the demand's going to keep going up, not down. And so whatever inventory, decides to come to the market's going to absorb it. I mean, it's all hyper local. And so, Las Vegas is going to perform differently than Miami, which is going to perform differently than Dallas, which is going to perform differently than San Francisco, right? And so you got to look at your market individually. But as a collective, there's infinitely more equity in real estate now. And so homeowners just aren't going to walk away from it the way they did in 2008, 9, and 10. They're just not.
Yeah.
And so to say that we're going to have a housing crisis that matches 2008, 9, and 10, I mean, I'm not seeing it. And everybody I know who looks at the real raw data, none of them are seeing it either. Certainly not yet. There's nothing to indicate that there's going to be some sort of crash. There might be, 1% or 2% corrections here and there, but not 40% or 80%. Like, none of that. No, that's not in play. And me personally, like, to be honest, I'm toying with the idea of moving to a different part of Southern California. I live in Southern California. I'm toying with the idea of maybe moving. And I'm looking at possibly buying, and I see the craziness, but I'm just also not seeing any letting up of it. Right. And so I'm just not going to make my decision based on that. I'm going to make a decision based on my lifestyle, based on my family, based on where I want to live and why. There's a tremendous migration to suburban America because people can office from their home now. Like, the demand for single family homes with a home office is through the roof.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just, wow. If you're selling a single family home that has an extra bedroom that could be turned into a home office, like, that's hot demand right now.
Yeah.
And the heavy urban areas like downtown Los Angeles and downtown San Diego and downtown, where you've got heavy condo living, there's less demand for that these days. But, okay, I'm still looking at prices in downtown Los Angeles and they're not coming down. Not yet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're not.
The demand is still there. Like, okay, it's less demand, but not demand where the prices are dropping. And so I just don't see it. And that's not a reason. I mean, if you're speculating on value of real estate, from an investment standpoint, I'd say that that's a bad way to buy real estate anyway. If you're investing in real estate, if you're looking at buying a primary residence, it's about school district, it's about your family, it's about your lifestyle. It's not about if you're going to live there for 10 years or 15 years, like, property value is not relevant. It's just not in play.
Well, let's double down on that point, Eric, because you've been, I think I like your perspective. Not I think, I know I like your perspective, but you've been very clear about this sort of every time we talk. And I think when you talk to agents, and agents talk to their buyers in particular, who are saying, okay, is the market going to crash? I think everyone I've spoken to as well shares your perspective. There's nothing that we're seeing that would indicate that that's going to happen. But are prices going to drop a little bit or not? And I think the perspective that you've always had, and I think it's just an important reminder, is for an agent who's representing a buyer who's looking for their home, that those little differences really don't make a difference. Like you said, it's about school district, it's about the neighborhood, it's about the home office, it's about a bunch of other things. And so you're telling people that, definitely go now. I mean, you got to do this now, right?
Yeah. You do it now if your life is dictating that you should do it now.
Yeah.
Right. If your life isn't dictating that you should move, then don't move. Right. It's what is your life or lifestyle or life choices? What is that dictating? Right. I mean, if you're a husband, wife with 2 kids, you've got a 3rd kid on the way, and you're living in a 3-bedroom house, you need a 4th bedroom, then you're deciding to move to a house with a 4th bedroom because you've got another child on the way. You're not doing it based on economic forecasting of property values based on that. Like, that's not the decision on whether you're buying a new primary residence or not. That's just not how you should be deciding to live your life. Right? If you're going to be living in that house long term, like that, you need to plan long term, not deal with short term speculation about whether real estate values are going to go up 1% or 3% or down 3% or 4%. Like that's not a relevant factor in your decision as to whether you should move or not. It just isn't.
It makes perfect sense.
It's fear-based. It's not. Yeah. It's not life planning-based.
Eric, let's wrap up a couple questions I have on sort of the current market, and then let's talk a little bit about sort of your perspective on what agents should be doing. So 2 questions for you, Eric. One is, as it relates to forbearance, right? So the overall numbers are dropping a bit. They're still exceptionally high. We know that not all of the people who've requested forbearance are not making their payments. Many of them are. So any updates there? And then 2, with rates, I think everybody just always wants to know. They know they're historically low. Are they going to stay low? What does your crystal ball show you? What's the fluctuation look like? Let's talk about those 2 topics, and we can move on to some agent perspectives.
Yeah. So as far as rates, let me try and give your viewers how to make their own conclusions about rates. Right? There's 2 things that are going to affect interest rates. And so you got to look at those 2 things, and there's 2 things only. There's no third thing that affects mortgage rates. Yeah. Because people think, the Federal Reserve. No, Federal Reserve has nothing to do with mortgage rates. Yeah. Right? That's the Fed funds rate. It's a short-term interest rate. Has nothing to do with it. Where mortgage rates, 30-year fixed rates go is based on the supply and demand of mortgage-backed securities. Mortgage-backed securities are bonds, right? They're bought and sold. That's what Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, Ginnie Mae. That's what they do. They create tranches of mortgages, and then they sell them as mortgage-backed securities, right? And so the sale of those mortgage-backed securities, the supply and the demand of those mortgage-backed securities is what drives mortgage rates. That's it. Okay. So now, what are the 2 factors that determine the supply and the demand of mortgage-backed securities? So 1 is the stock market, and 2 is inflation. That's it. Right? So there's no third factor. Right? Supply and demand of mortgage-backed securities is based on the performance of the stock market, number 1, and number 2, numbers on inflation. Okay, so now let me walk you through that. So if the stock market is going up, mortgage rates go up. Okay, those are correlated. If the stock market goes down, mortgage rates go down. Now the other factor is inflation. If inflation goes up, mortgage rates go up. If inflation comes down, mortgage rates come down. Okay, and we can do another call where I can walk everybody through why that is. But for the simplicity of this conversation, just know stock market up, mortgage rates go up. Inflation up, mortgage rates go up. Right?
Pretty simple. Yep.
Let's keep it simple for the viewers today. Okay. So stock market has been doing well, right? And so mortgage rates took a tank there, right? We were down in the 2s there for a little bit. So what forced mortgage-backed securities down into the 2s? Well, there's a huge demand based on what was the insecurity of the stock market, right? And the cost of goods, right? Inflation was, you could say that toilet paper costs went up, right? But that's not factored into inflation costs. And so inflation was perceived to be under control, but there was a lot of fear in the stock market, right? And so large investors were pulling their money out of the stock market and buying bonds. There was a huge demand all of a sudden for bonds. And so mortgage-backed securities, because of the massive amount of demand, mortgage-backed securities went down, right? Because the price went down. And so, okay, so that's great. But then the stock market started rebounding. There started being better numbers coming out. So institutional investors started pulling their money out of bonds, started buying stocks again, right? And so now there's less demand for bonds, mortgage rates are up. And so market goes up, rates go up. So that's the correlation. So you have to ask yourself, over the next 30, 60, 90, 120 days, where do you see the stock market going? Do you see it continuing to increase, or do you see it correcting? Now, if you believe, as a watcher of the stock market, if you believe the stock market's going to go up, then mortgage rates are probably going to go up a little bit. Now, what's up? I mean, I think we're going to be in threes, to the end of the year for sure. I can't say for sure, but I mean, that's my opinion. I don't see us coming out of the threes anytime soon. Do I think we're going to go back in the twos? No, I don't see us going back in the twos. But things can change, man, right? And when they change, it changes quick. And then the other thing you have to look at is inflation. Do you think inflation is going to get out of control? And so that's where the Fed comes into play. What the Fed is doing by raising and lowering interest rates is they're managing inflation.
Right.
That's what they're doing. And so don't look at Fed raised or lowered rates. Look at what they're saying is happening with inflation. That's what's driving mortgage-backed securities. And so we're just not seeing anything that's going to drive rates away from the threes anytime soon. It's a pretty stabilized market right now, unless something dramatic happens. And so the dramatic event that is coming up to all of us, right, is November 3rd, right, the election that's going out. And so is that, there's going to be a lot of noise in the market leading up to that. I mean, it's already started this week, pretty heavy with a lot of the political noise. And so is that going to shift the market? Well, it depends on the level of noise. It depends on what events start occurring. It depends on what news starts getting released. It depends on how the stock market reacts to that. It depends on employment numbers. It depends on, there's a lot of things that are going to come out daily and weekly that may shift that. What's going to happen on November 4th after the election? Well, it depends on who gets elected. It depends on how the market reacts to all of that. And so you just have to be wary of news can create shifts, but everything we're looking at that is foreseeable so far tells us we're going to be in a very stable mortgage rate environment so far.
What's it going to take to get us back to the twos?
So there would have to be, if there's a stock market correction, right? If something happens in the stock market, right, where stocks start going down fast, hard, and heavy, the way I look at it and say, if I'm a borrower, if I'm a homeowner and I'm thinking about refinancing, the best time to refinance is when the news comes on and says the stock market crashed today.
Right.
Right? You have 24 hours to call your loan officer and lock your rate. Because when that happens, there's this emotional frenzy that drives mortgage rates down for 24 to 48 hours. It's that fast, and then they pop right back up. What is that delta? Just I want to make sure people understand this, right?
That's interesting, right? You see the news, market has a bad day or two, boom, you get on the phone and you call. What's the difference between, if we're talking half a point, like how big of a difference does that make? Could that make?
Oh yeah, sometimes it can be a half a point to the rate. Wow. It depends on it depends on the crash, depends on the correction, it depends, right? But I've seen it be a half point, but then it bounces quick. And so to put it into some easy terms, right? Let's say you sell apples for a living. You own an apple store, literally red apples. That's all you say. You sell red apples, right? And your supplier drops off 100 apples a day, and you have to sell 100 apples a day, and on average you sell 95 apples, and each apple is $1, and you give 5 apples away to the hungry at the end of the day because you had 5 apples left over, right? And you sell them for $1. Now all of a sudden your supplier comes to you and says, okay, look, instead of selling apples for 50 cents, you sell them for $1. We're going to sell you apples for 10 cents instead of 50 cents, but we need you to buy 1,000. Right? Okay, am I going to sell 1,000 apples a day at $1? Probably not. But if I drop my price to 40 cents, can I sell 1,000 apples at 40 cents? Right? I create buyers based on my price point. Right? And so when there's a massive demand for mortgage-backed securities, right, we have to create mortgage-backed securities. So how do you create mortgage-backed securities? You drop rates and you bring people in to I need more mortgages. I got to sell more mortgages, right? The rates drop. And so what creates that demand is institutional investors leaving the stock market. Why do they leave the stock market? Because the market's tanking. But once they bought the apples, the price goes back to $1, right? It's a short-term thing.
Yes.
It doesn't last a week or 2 weeks. That's not how long it lasts. It's a couple days. Right. And so, let's say today we're at 3.25, and then the market tanks and we're at 2.75, but then it bounces back up to 3. You miss the 2.75.
It's that quick. Right? That's really interesting.
You thought about it. Well, I'm going to shop for a few days, and then you missed it. You missed it.
Very
and
interesting.
So any homeowners, make sure you have a loan officer that you trust. Right, this is an advisor to you, and have your finger on the button. Right, when your loan advisor calls you and says the market tanked, I can lock you into this, lock and send them all your documents right there. Right, like when there's blood in the streets, lock your mortgage. Right, refinance your mortgage when there's blood in the streets. That's when you get the best rates. And so when we saw that market correction, rates popped down to the 2s, and the whole world refinanced. Not the whole world, not everybody who should have refinanced did, right? A lot of people sat on the sidelines thinking, oh, it'll go lower. No, we hit all-time lows in the history of our nation, And so when you hit all-time lows, there's nowhere to go but up, right? It bounced up, which was predictable. And so if you're thinking about refinancing, just have a trusted loan advisor who is advising you through that. If you don't trust your loan advisor, right, find a new one, get someone you do trust.
Absolutely. No, that's great advice, Eric.